All right. Okay. Yeah. Fuck yeah. Ugh. Um. What I'm supposed to be doing? If I want to follow my plan, which I never do, is reading Ancient Evenings, Book of the Child, Part 5. But honestly, I don't want to do that. Well, actually, the last chapter was pretty good. Do 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 boo doo boo doo boo doo boo doo boo boo doo boo. Baby, these lamps are falling all over. Oh yeah, I forgot. Reading this. I got Godzilla in Hell. So it's maybe I should go back to my roots of this just being a positive Godzilla review podcast. I know there wasn't a lot of things to say when I just. Well, let's start out. I read half of this so far. It's good. That ends that review. Okay, should I do it? We'll see. Just hang tight. Now that I've realized no one's watching this, even though I put it online, I feel a lot better. So, it's 11 pages. Part 4? I thought that was a short one. Part 4 was not short in comparison. Or what was it? I know that I've been keeping this. Oh, yeah. It still took me 20 minutes to read that, though, huh? Jiminy Christmas. Oh, should I do it? Should I read a little bit? Yeah, sure. Sure, that's fine. So, Book of the Child. Botch. Buck. Botch. Buck. Part 5. I'm going to make it very clear. I'm not going to go too far with this one. Part 5. So last time, Man in Head at 1 is still reliving his life, a day in his life, as a 6-year-old boy, even though he is, I think, a 21-year-old dead guy, where he had a bit of a mental crisis when staring at a dog, which happens to all of us. It's cool. And he then was kind of put into a chill out room where it seems like our hero here is a bit more of an empath than we originally believed. And no, I'm not talking about Godzilla. This is a signed copy? This is for a different book. This book is not signed. Norman Mailer died, I think. Okay, let's just... Well, you know what? If no one's watching this, I can do whatever I want. But that's not the point of this one. You do whatever you want on all the other ones. Shh. Okay. Oh, and the room he's in is like painted to look like he's outside by the pyramids. It's cool. Lots of cracks in this cup. Too bad. I love it. I awoke in a stillness so profound that I could picture the birds on the marble steps of the landing before 2 gates, and could even feel one colored feather twitching delicately over another across all of the distance of the 3 great courtyards that separated me from the river. I began then to have the most unusual experience, although it was without peril and came as no surprise to me. It was just that my mother, having told me not to stray, I was nonetheless able to go off like 2 people in separate directions. My mind most certainly was now inclined, on the one hand, to leave the palace altogether, and follow our boatman, Bone Smasher, as he went drinking through the marketplace of Memphi. Yet By the other hand, I also sat in attendance on the Pharaoh and listened to how he disposed of the problems of government. Okay, so he's out of the room. Meanwhile, my body never moved. I obeyed my mother and did not stir from the couch. Oh, he is just having a what's it called? Lucid dream? No. Out of body experience? He's a psychonaut. I obeyed my mother and did not stir from the couch. It was just that, in a bewilderment of senses, sweet as the pleasure older people must take in wine, so did I go off into the mind of the boatman we called Set Kesu, and he was living in all of the fury of his name. It sound on the ear just like its meaning. We called him Bone Smasher, but that was polite. His true name was Ass Bone, a bugger of such dimensions, said the boatman. That set such a bugger meaning his dick, I guess, of such dimensions, said the other boatman, that Set Kesu could pulverize the bone in your back. Oh my god. All right. Hey, honey. I do not know why I followed, but I lived nearer to him than if I sat by his side, and I felt as if I knew his thoughts. Not intimately. I did not hear words go through his head, and maybe a few words I did, but I could feel the anger in his chest, raw as the lungs of a lion. Come here. Hey. Raw as the lungs of a lion, and his sour stomach was souring mine. I felt as if I had been rolled up in a rug full of old spit and old retchings, while red ants explored my skin. But that could have been the shock I suffered at daring to venture so close. What I felt next was fatigue, a bitter ache in every nerve I knew, more painful and certainly heavier than any tiredness I had known before. And I heard Bone Smasher growl to the people drinking near him. Had us up for the night fixing this boat and pulling the oars today. He's complaining about being awake all night and then having to work all day. No, he didn't, said a man waving a jug of perfumed beer, the smell at once sour, bitter, and much too sweet from the perfume. You drifted down the river today. You don't drift, man. Not in his boat. Every curl in the current is a peril. Just drifting, said the man with the perfumed beer. Keep your rotten eye out of my face, Bone Smasher told him. The man talking, big as Bone Smasher, had only one eye, and it was full of pus and inflamed. But looking around the bar, even in the dim light of this dirty beer house where there was no windows, and the only opening was the door, I could count the faces, and most were blind in an eye. Maybe it was 15 out of 20. I did not know if I had ever seen so many before. Among our servants, and certainly among the servants of the Pharaoh, a half-blind woman or man was kept only if they were old and trusted, who wanted to look on a wrinkled eye socket every day. Whereas here, I felt as if all our desert sand, and all the dung of our animals, not to speak of the terrible glare of the sunlight, had been rubbing on the lids of our people from the hour they were born. I looked with discomfort at a drunk who had fallen on his face and was lying in a corner of this bar, his forehead ground into all the old filth of bread crust, onion rotting, spilled beer, spilled wine, sputum, puke, and even a little mud where a puddle of beer had softened the dirt floor. Deep in that litter of the corner, the drunk snored. Drifting, said the man with the pus-filled eye, is drifting. Open your mouth again, Bone Smasher told him, and I'll stick my thumb in your other eye. I was close enough to live in the pleasure of his thoughts, and his fatigue was gone. He was breathing in all the enjoyment of a rage that filled his head with a red light. The red rim of his eye before him turned pale, and then red as blood, and the other man's skin went from dark to pale white of a fish's belly, then as dark again as the purple of Bone Smasher's rage. For it was not the colors of the man's skin which were changing, but the sights in Bone Smasher's head. He was looking at the other drunk's lips. So soon as they said one more word, Bone Smasher would be on him. He could feel how his thumb would gouge the eye. It would pop its socket like the pulp of a peach squeezed through the skin. The girl who brought the drinks was standing before him, however. "Oh, let it be a good day, Set Kesu," she said. "Drink until you are happy." "Bring me 18 cups of wine," he said, and smiled, and I could feel his drunkenness. I knew the dizziness passing over my head was the power of a drunkenness, for I had tasted wine, and it made me drunk, though not like this. The walls of the barroom were ready to fall on him should he stand up. To his surprise more than mine, he looked at the barmaid and said, "Your dress is a beautiful white. How do you keep it so clean?" "By staying out of reach of people with dirty hands," she cried out and skipped away. "Come back," he bawled. "I want the wine from Merotis." "I'll be back," she said. "And a loaf of your filthy bread." I had a glimpse of the simple white dress being pulled from her body. Saw his big hands in the cheeks of her buttocks and pulling them apart. Saw her body wide open like a carcass in a butcher shop, except she was neither wounded nor bleeding, only twisting her limbs with his, and a pleasure on her face. Then he was sitting on her head with his breech clout off, a club of a phallus between his legs, and with it he beat on her breasts. I knew it was only something to see. It was only something to see within his head, for the girl had gone to the long table where the jars of wine were kept, and was now bringing one back, a flat loaf of bread under her arm. "This is the wine from Buto," she said. "The wine from Buto stinks," he said. She did not sit down, still swaying, so that I could have been perched like a mouse on the back of his neck. Yes, I saw these events with all the wonder of a mouse. I also saw the walls swaying. Taking the wine she brought, he pulled a stopper of hard wax out of the jug, poured wine into his cup, swallowed it, poured another. The drink went down with a taste of blood. "It smells in here," he said. "Pay me, Set," she murmured, "and the air outside will feel good." "It's hot outside, and it stinks in here." He was furious, but had forgotten why. From his breech clout, from a fold in the hairy skin of his testicles, his fingers running under the cloth and over his short hairs, just long enough for the girl's mouth to quiver. He did not know, nor did I, whether her lips trembled or he only thought they moved at the feel of his finger on himself. He brought out from that fold of his flesh one of his copper coins. Can't really keep things there, but okay. I can't. From a fold in the hairy skin of his testicles? I don't think I could keep a coin there. I don't think anyone could. Or whatever. He brought out from that fold of his flesh one of his copper coins, in weight a quarter of a untu, utnu, utnu, heavier than both of my testicles together. And waved it under her nose with a gesture he might have borrowed from his lord Menenhetit. So resourceful was its mixture of contempt at the reek of this bar, and pride in the luxury of the manner by which he had plucked it forth. "I'll marry you some day," said Bone Smasher, and began to roll towards the door. The brown earth of the floor equal to the dark brown of the Nile in the late afternoon. Feeling the floor flow beneath him like a slow-moving stream, he had a great need to pass water himself, and the size of that desire left me and Sweetfinger obliged to share the pressure on his scrotum, and it hurt me more than a door closing on my foot. I wondered that he did not roar. He turned around, however, wheeling as ponderously as a barge coming about in the river, and went up to the drunk with one red eye. "You don't drift down the great river," he said, and belched up a bile of spiced beer, palm brandy, and the last belts of wine of Buto, added, There are currents that turn in a circle and holes that suck you in. He was about to add that there were rocks that you could not see when the water was high, so you had to remember where they were or they'd stove you in. But the drunk with his lonely eye merrily beamed and gave a foolish look, and waved his forefinger. You drift, he said, as if the profundity of every wise thought was here. Bone Smasher pulled his cloth to the side and disgorged urine all over the man. Laughter went through the bar until Bone Smasher was done. The drunk merely collected humiliation, then simpered, sat down, and began to sleep. Bone Smasher turned. He was happy for a moment, the loaf of bread under his arm. He started for the door. No one said a word until he was almost clear. But the smell of his urine followed him, strong as the hot water of a horse on straw. A babble began in the depth of the bar as he went out and built in its bravery as it passed by the old people, all the poor tradespeople and apprentices and workmen until they were throwing half-eaten onions at him and crusts of bread. From a distance. And he staggered into the street with the majestic balance of his heavily stupefied head, going around the thought of returning to knock a head or two together. The last words he heard through the door were the clear threat of someone saying, "Your Lord Mendenheaded will hear of this." Then he was alone on the street, and only myself to follow his breathing. And his lungs were gasping in as much strain as if they had been pulling on the oars for hours, breathing in fear and some ecstasy of the fear itself. Menden had him whipped near to death on one occasion, and the sensations were the most unforgettable of his life. And aware once more of himself on the street, children hooting at him, men and women giving him a good space, only one young fellow big as himself, standing in the middle of the dark and narrow street with the walls 4 stories high. He and the other approaching slowly. They would have to fight if they touched. That confidence turned into caution as they came near each other's rage. They passed, both men shamed by the failure to touch. Set, feeling tired, sat down in a small plaza by a shaduf where women were gathering water with their pails, and reached into his loaf of bread, broke out 3 fingers' worth, began to chew. My mother always told me that I had a mouth of little pearls. And it is certain I never tasted bread like this. It felt as rough on the tongue as bran. And before he had taken 3 bites, his jaws ground down on a whole grain the size of a pea, and it chipped his tooth, or what was left of the stump of that tooth, cracking it hard enough to drive a spear through his drunkenness. He cried out from the sudden pains in his mouth. Oof. For they went reverberating back through all the years of his teeth had been broken down by grit and pebbles and sand and whole grain and flakes of stone from the grinding wheel. Brief aside, I heard that when they dig up mummies and stuff, they all got messed up teeth because there's so much sand in Egypt that even if just a little bit, that sand-faring folk of time past had much worse teeth, like bald or like ground down because of the amount of sand that they ate on accident. Not even knowing it, not even feeling it, just chipping away slowly. That's what I heard from somebody. Sorry, I watched Barry, and there's a character in it that's Russian that I've been talking like him the whole time, for a long time now, man. I don't know if he's Russian. Probably. Let's not get into that. From the grinding wheel. He saw his mother working into flour a fistful of wheat she had scattered on a hollowed-out slab outside the door of the house where he grew up. Maybe it was the smell of the bread he held to his nose now, the same sour urine in the pores of the bread. But he was back in the work of his childhood, getting all the dung, manure, paste, and shit out of the donkeys, chickens, goats, cows, dogs, and sheep. All of that old pungence lived in his nose. Balls and turds and flops for his mother to shape into bricks and dry in the sun. That was the stuff with which they baked the bread when they could not find wood. Oh, as fuel. And there was never enough wood. By the smell of the stuff he now ate, His nose must be traveling through the anus of a goat. And he whimpered again from the throbbing in his newly cracked stump of a tooth. The whimpering as agreeable to him as the ebbing of a wound on its way to heal. And he stood up, smiling or glaring, as the mood took him, at whichever woman happened to be passing through this little square. Her eggs and live chicken for sale. One girl with a goose flapping under her arm. Another woman with a ream of linen she had woven, the color so white it blazed the sun back into his eyes. And he had a long, stumbling recovery as he bounced on his feet from step to step down a road that led to the great square of the market. The sun overhead, as cruel as a body sleeping next to him with baleful breath. He traveled with his eyes closed, and the sun's rays searing the red, irritated rim of his eyes. There were some who said that all the gods could live in one god, and he was the sun. If this was true, then he was very angry now. All right, let's just gather everything we've learned so far today. It seems like not only can Menenhedet 2 astral project into the world, but can kind of choose where he goes and can choose to inhabit the thoughts of other people. Pretty cool. I wonder if he is even the person he says he is. If your secret power is to inhabit and know fully the life of another person, how can you be so certain that the consciousness that is yours is actually yours? Or not just like that aspect of a bigger, higher being? Does that make sense? Probably not. I hope that... What a fun book this is. No matter how fucked up it is, like... And there's a lot more to go, too. I forgot how many pages. What do you think, 700? 688. Easy. We're on page 146. The gods were in the shit, Bone Smasher said to himself, smelling the old dung in the bread, and he chose to glare at one lovely lady passing by in a transparent dress. She had long dyed blue hair, oiled, then wound at the bottom around little balls of wax. She was wearing bracelets and beads and had a pinned flower just above her ear. He stared as she walked around him, stared at what he could see of the shadow of her pubic hair, stared at the faint and intricate tattoo on her chin, hoping he would see the insignia of a whore and could go along to her brothel. But she was gone while he debated, and I felt a stirring in his groin, different from the urge to urinate. This felt more like the earth beneath a large rock, when the rock is being lifted. "Strength and booze," he called after her. "Strength and booze." And when she did not reply, and what he could see of her buttocks through her transparent dress was also about to disappear, he began to laugh, which hurt his tooth, and shouted, "A word to the wise is a stick on a dumb ass." A saying that came from Menenhedet, who would use it when he whipped the boatman. Bone Smasher had taken it up to whip other boatmen. His mind now in the glue of these drunken thoughts because of the peculiarity of that stick, and the word had exactly the same sound. He had never noticed it before. Medu was the word for word, and Medu was the word for stick. In the middle of burping, he suddenly felt splendid. Putting your stick up a woman was the same as giving her the word. Yes, language was like a box he had once seen with another box inside of it. He could feel his cock right now, and it had an eye for dark places. "The gods are in the shit," he shouted, and fell on his face. Naked boys were going by, and naked boys were going by, and naked little girls. All of the children of the quarter were going by. Some in no more than a bracelet to show they might be naked but not altogether poor. And they went by in a circle around Bone Smasher's revolving brain. He lay on... Oh, is he just imagining this? He lay on the street, and a naked boy with a thick tress of hair covering his ear now stopped, looked carefully at Bone Smasher, and, giggling a little, tried to urinate on his foot, but it was only a few drops. Bone Smasher stirred. The boy's drops pinched off. Hi, Lotus! I love you! She's just straight deaf now. That happened quick. The boy's drops pinched off, and the boatman was dreaming again. Donkeys passed by with loads of straw. He looked at them from the ground, one eye open. Large horned oxen, driven back from the market, crowded through the plaza and walked around him. Fishermen passed with baskets of fish and a baker with loaves. The pastry, meat, fruit, shoes, corn, sandals, onions, and wheat, the beads and perfume and oil, the honey and the sleeping mats, bronze razors, pickaxes, baskets of corn, and a brace of ducks. A vendor with leather bottles for wine passed him on their way to the market or back from it. The smell of dates and spices, honey and almonds and pistachios came out of a store to his back, and now another store opened on this little plaza. And a cook and 2 waiters began the evening meal. Around the turn in the street from the plaza, where the great square opened, were a number of other food shops I had visited with Ayesiab. And I remembered the smell of roasting goose and the stews they would make from the gravy in the saucepans. Once with her I had spent part of the morning watching them chop the vegetables. She liked to cook. Now I was next to dreaming with Bone Smasher of the joy of buying cooked food in one of these places and taking it home. That was prosperity, thought Bone Smasher in the repose of his sleep on the street. And he dreamed of expensive shoemakers who offered sandals with turned-up points, and of the goldsmith who made earrings and bracelets from African ingots. There was one necklace of electrum with lapis lazuli from Elam. Bone Smasher had heard that Elam was at the end of the world, and he wanted the necklace. The boat of his mind sailed out for Elam across the deserts to the east, and all the while blacksmiths and stonemasons were closing their shops, and carpenters were walking home through the little plaza, and the shoemaker, the potter, the barber, the dyer stinking of carrion scraped from the hides. Slaves and merchants and foreign traders went by, and fine ladies carried in fine chairs. 2 boys began to fight over a fall of manure steaming still from one of the horses, in a chariot team that swerved at the last to avoid Bone Smasher's head. The boys put down their collection baskets and were wrestling on the stones of the street until one could hold the other long enough with one hand to scoop up the horse balls with the other. And Bone Smasher stirred, opened his eyes, saw the fights of his own childhood, and got up to stagger into the fires of the market. At evening, scowling at all of the blacks and Hebrews he saw milling in the great plaza. And as he moved on, so did I move away and withdraw my thoughts from Bone Smasher, in much the way that later, when old enough to make love to a woman, I would after a time take my leave of her with the satisfaction that I had gone into her body so well I had not known by the end where her belly ended and mine began. A pleasure to lose oneself that well. It's a pleasure to lose oneself that well. I also remember that when I would withdraw, yes, slowly take back my phallus to myself, be in myself again and no other. So just in such a fashion now did I withdraw my thoughts from all of Bone Smasher's feelings, and return to that rose-colored room of the Pharaoh as happy as if I had just made love. It makes more tea. I don't think I ever said, hey, welcome to Prelude to Ulysses. This is Alex Reed's Ancient Evenings by Norman Mailer. So he just pulled out from Bone Smasher's brain in the same way that he would eventually pull out of several ladies that he enjoyed, whose company he enjoys. Tape. This is tape. It was then I became aware that the other house of my brain must have been living with the Pharaoh through much of the audiences he was now giving. For I awoke with a sentiment of much intimacy toward him. The Pharaoh's feelings so sinuous and close to all that I had been taught that I felt much nearer to him than the boatman. Oh wait, is he like the Pharaoh's kid or something? That was a part of something. I totally forgot about that part. Yeah, his mom comes in and is like, oh, your dad, he ain't quite your daddy, He's your father, but he was never your daddy. Guardians of the Galaxy, best movie ever. Besides other movies. Okay. Shh. I awoke with a sentiment of much intimacy toward him. The Pharaoh's feelings so sinuous and close to all I had been taught that I felt much nearer to him than to the boatman. In truth, the understanding that the Pharaoh was almost my father gave even more pleasure to joining him, like the conclusion of a jump that proves to be safe. Yet all the greater was the disappointment, for now I discovered that the interior of his person was much less agreeable to me than the first wonder I knew at kissing his toe. All of the pronouns are capitalized, just like when we were discussing the gods. His toe. He was feeling no more at this instant than a cramp in his belly from a turn of his digestion. Just the moderate pain of a man who is used to ignoring for all of a morning or afternoon the complaints of his body. That was his first sentiment. And on an instant, it taught me what it was like to be a grown man with duties. There was so much sourness of spirit, as if his interior tasted like a lemon. Now I knew the bleak face of his unspoken feelings, and it was as grim as the weather when the sky turned dark with dust. In such storms, the air was cold, and that wind which we say is as mean as evil, which for fact is its name, the Khamsin, evil, blew steadily across Khamsin, is the name of a wind, blew steadily across the desert, and howled down the streets of Memphis, leaving billows of sand in front of every door. Ptah-nem-hotep's thoughts were like the misery of sand stinging the skin, and I recognized to my own misery, after the sweet and natural fall of my mind into his, that his duty was like the weight of a dead man on one's back. Nothing warm was left in his heart, unless it was a desire for the moment when he could find repose in the calm of evening. God, I relate to all that shit. It's depressing. Like an echo that is lost, but for the remnant that lingers in one's reverie, so did I feel the last sinuous beauty of his heart seem to expire in all the solemnities of listening to the one man whom I heard my parents speak of as often as himself, the high priest Khem-Usha of the high temple of Ammon at Thebes, who is also acting in these troubled days as our vizier, V-I-Z-I-E-R, some type of job. Yet with all such power, this Khem-Usha still chose to speak up to the balcony from the floor of the counselors below. We're going to look up the word vizier. V-I-Z-I-E-R. I don't think I do a lot of dictionary stuff on this channel, or do I? I don't remember. On this playlist, I do all sorts of other shit. I'm reading like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books right now. Not counting the dictionary. 3 of them are poetry, though. 2 of them. 3 of them. V-I-Z. I don't know the alphabet. Oh, W. V comes before W. If you're doing it backwards. No, forward. Fuck. V. Vintage. Vino. What's vino? Oh, wine. Vino. Vital. Volute. VJ Day. The day Japan accepted the Allied surrender terms in World War II. That's either August 14th, I'm not going to tell anybody that, 1945, or September 2nd, 1945 was when they signed it. Vizier was right above it. A high government official in certain Muslim countries, especially the former Ottoman Empire. Okay, cool. I'm addicted to saline. Oh god, I forgot where we were. Oh, so Kem Usha is, although a highly decorated government official, still speaks to the pharaoh from below the balcony. The pharaoh had to force himself to listen, and did. He felt that an audience with him must be injured if he did not offer the finest attention. So Ptah-nem-hotep listened to each word spoken by Kem Usha. That was the cause of his pain. I, who now dwelt like a bird in the corner of his double crown, felt the weight of the high priest on the pharaoh's fine ear. Kem Usha had a voice to command courtesy, as slow and deep as Kevin Spacey in The Garden of Good and Evil. Oh, sorry, I misread that. As slow and deep as the echo of temple chambers. Indeed, only a voice as deep and hollow as his own could intone the gravest prayers. There was a power in the deliberation of Kem Usha's voice that could overcome any mood contradictory to his own. Moreover, one's gaze could never slip away for long from the shining prominence of his shaven skull, and so could not avoid the solemnity of his large black eyes beneath their black brows. Ptah-nem-hotep sat with his fingers together, his arms on the red velvet of that railing, from which he looked down on the lords, and priests and counselors, and royal overseers who had come to this audience. Gathered in orderly files below were some 10 or 12 men, standing, kneeling, or with their faces to the dirt as mine had been earlier. On the balcony, Hathfertiti, Menenhedet, and Nef-kep-Ochem, I don't remember who that is, sat in attendance around the pharaoh, and they were also listening to Kem Usha. He spoke as if each full sound he uttered was equal to the presence of a new statue in one's courtyard. O rising sun who lightens the world with your beauty, said Kem Usha to Ptah-nem-hotep, you drive away the darkness of Egypt. Your rays penetrate into all lands. There is no place deprived of your beauty. Your words rule the destinies of all lands. You hear all that is said. Your eye is more brilliant than any star of heaven. In the name, thought Ptah-nem-hotep, listening to the sounds of movement in his stomach and bowels, in the name of that river of food and drink that moves in me, Why must I listen to a psalm first offered to the pharaoh Merneptah more than 80 years ago? But he inclined his head to Khem-Usha, as though the words were for himself alone. Now the counselors who had been prostrating their faces into the dirt rose to a kneeling position, and those who were standing knelt. Only Khem-Usha was erect. He spoke, and the others answered in unison. Yours is the resemblance to Ra, they cried aloud. Every word that issues from your mouth is like the words of Horus to the sunrise, and Horus to the sunset. Your lips measure words more truly than the finest balance of Mot. Who can be perfect like you? I could feel satisfaction arise in Ptah-nem-hotep sweet as honey himself. But then, as if the taste were too agreeable, he thought, I respond to words composed for another king. I am no stronger than Tet-Tut, who rolls on his back when praise begins. Tet-Tut was the dog's name. He gave a small cold smile to his audience. His head felt heavy from the double crown. No monument is built, chanted the counselors, without your knowledge. You are the supreme commander. If you say to the celestial waters, come to the mountain, the waters will flow at your word. For you are Ra. For you are the great beetle Khepera. Ooh, I want to know what that is. Your tongue is the sanctuary of truth. A god sits upon your lips. You are eternal. Butt kissers, huh? Khem-Usha knelt. Then, like, what kind of business are they doing right here? Like, oh, big giant dick. We love you. What are they trying to get across? Maybe she continue reading. Thanks, bro. Khem-Usha knelt, then prostrated his forehead to the ground. The other counselors touched their foreheads to the ground. My parents and Menenhet, because they were sitting in royal armchairs, had only to bow their heads. I could feel a power arise in the body of Ptah-nem-hotep. During the recitation of these last words, he drew in from the devotion of those who were below, but I could also taste the bitterness of his tongue. Your last praises, he said to Khem-Usha, are rich and wise and may even be appropriate, since they appear on the stone put up by my ancestor, the strong bull who loves the truth, great Ramses II. He had such words inscribed on a pillar along the roads that lead to the mines of Etbaya, E-T-B-A-Y-A. Khem-Usha replied, your eyes read all the inscriptions, great loving partner of the truth. Last year at this time you addressed me in these same texts written for Merneptah and Ramses II. I praised you then for your selection. Khem-Usha replied, your ancestors are great gods, even as you will sit, great Two-House, in such a place equal in elevation to the praises given to your ancestors. Ptah-nem-hotep applied the tip of his forefinger to the end of his long and delicate nose, and I could feel his breath stirring. To give me words, written for great ancestors, only confers honor and strength, he said. If the gift can fit in the box. From the balcony he stared down upon Khem-Usha, but the dark eyes of the high priest did not weaken beneath his black brows. Indeed, they stared back. For many years, said Khem-Usha, I have dwelt in the language of prayer, but I do not know if my heart understands the balance of your words, O great Two-House. I love this Two-House, Two-Land, or Two-City, or whatever. Oh, I like that name. We seem to evoke the name of Mot, Ptah-nem-hotep replied. Is it agreeable to her balance that praises for a brave man are laid upon the head of a prudent man? My ancestor Ramses II may not be happy to find the magnificence of his feats compared to the prudence of my judgments. Khem-Usha, this is the day of the pig. I don't know what that means, but I love it. That is my knowledge, great lord. Oh, if we do not offer the truth to each other on the day of the pig, we will not come near to justice on other days. A speech was now uttered in Pharaoh's heart. Words as alert as the soldiers on parade passed through his chest, but none was said aloud. Only I could hear his thoughts. Other kings led their troops at the age of 10, but when I was that age, Kemusha, you led me in a naked dance, and we fell at the end all full of sweat in each other's arms, and wrestled until I do not remember how much of the domain of your body was in my nose. Ramses II tamed a lion and won the Battle of Kadesh, and Egypt was renowned from Syria to Punt. I have yet to lead an army into battle. I only hear from generals who lose battles for me. When Ramses II was 50, there was not a beauty in Memphis or Thebes who had not felt his heat on her mouth. I have a harem I do not visit, yet laughter issues from it. Half my charioteers do not dare to meet my eye. This is the day of the pig, when no custom is so valuable as to speak the truth. So I would beg of you, Kemusha, do not mock me with the feats of the great Ramses, dead for these 90 years, but let us speak of my true qualities, which are prudence, wit, and the power to receive in calm the worst of bad news. Let us ask if such is worthy of a pharaoh. Whoa! Whoa. The passions of his heart, however, were to be whipped and whipped again until perfect obedience was kept. Aloud he said to Kemusha, "Let me accept your good wishes, as they are expressed in the poet's great praise for my ancestors, Ramses II and Merneptah. Let your selection be well taken. I have enjoyed it. I would also have you know that here to celebrate with me on the day of the pig." Let's write that down and look it up later. Day of the pig. I'm going to start writing things down so I can look them up later. I'm going to try to remember to do that. I don't remember anything. To celebrate with me on the day of the pig is the great Lord Menenhedet, once general of the armies of Ammon, Ra, Ptah, Set, and... said Ptah-nem-hotep with a tender smile for Kemusha. He is the last remaining survivor of the Battle of Kadesh, and thereby, one must suppose, is a very wise man with much knowledge of Egypt. So far as I know, said Menenhedet with an easy smile and the powerful look of a virile man of 60, I am the only eye that still sees that battle. Now the counselors could be seen to whisper again. The Battle of Kadesh, the greatest battle of them all, had indeed been fought 150 years ago. In the early years... What? "150 years ago, in the early years of the reign of Ramses II, and that Pharaoh had kept his double crown for 65 years, before Merneptah followed, and Amenmesis and Siptah and Seti II, an Assyrian usurper for a few years." I could feel the amusement of Ptah-nem-hotep's mind as he observed the reckonings of his counselors. Yes, there had been set knocked in Ramses III, Ramses IV, Ramses V, Ramses VI, Ramses VII, Ramses VIII, and Ptah-nem-hotep himself, our own Ramses IX. All of the 13 pharaohs, I want to make it clear that I just read those in Roman numerals, which I don't know how Egyptians counted. Let's look that up too. How Egyptians count. I probably won't look up anything. Our own Ramses IX. All of 13 pharaohs in the 150 years. That's a lot of fucking people. What, they only do it for like 12 years at a time? Am I bad at math? Probably. I don't know. 150 years that had passed since the Battle of Kadesh. The counselors lifted their foreheads and saluted Menenhetit. Good, said Ptah-Nemhotep to himself. Now they are wondering if I will make him my vizier instead of Khemu-Usha. He had no more than finished this thought when I was brought back to myself on the couch in the rose-colored room. Hathfertiti was caressing me on the cheek. Come, she said. It is time for you to return to the patio, she smiled. I would like you to see the awe with which they regard your great-grandfather. I did not know, I said to her out of all of the surrender of this sleep, that had been like a life, no, 2 lives. Was it 3 if I counted myself? I did not know Menenhetit was born 180 years ago. For certain, Hathfertiti gave me a look. Then she touched my forehead with reverence. Come, she said, when she had control of her voice again. I suppose it is time to tell you a little more of the truth. You see, it is possible that your great-grandfather has been born 4 times. What? I so didn't want to read this book, and I fucking love it. So let's just recap. I do this sometimes just for myself, so I'll remember. Well, I don't do that, but this is what helped me remember the last time. So I want to remember to do that. So if I'm looking at before I do my next one, I can just look at this part of this video and be like, oh yeah, so Menenhetit II is still a 6-year-old boy sitting in the Pharaoh's chill-ass, dope smoke spot where there's paintings everywhere, and he is experiencing astral projection or whatever, where his mind seemingly can wander into the thoughts and locations of other people. It seems like he can choose also where he goes, like to whom he follows. He followed Bone Smasher or Ass Bone for a brief trip to a bar where he fantasized making sweet, sweet love to a barmaid in a white dress before pissing on a dude and then getting kicked out of that bar. Well, kind of screamed out of that bar. And then he fell on the ground after he tried to oogle some ladies, or is it ogle? I don't know. Woggle some ladies, just eyeball banging them right and left. And then a bunch of kids cruised by and took a piss on him, and it was funny. And at that point, Menenhetit II, who is experiencing the experiences of other people, then decides to travel to the Pharaoh, who he has been spending time with. And he realizes that the Pharaoh is just begrudgingly fulfilling his duties, while his mind is really just kind of in the inner pain of his body. It seems to be bad at digesting things, probably from generations and generations and generations and generations of inbreeding. That is not the healthiest thing for a young Pharaoh. I don't remember what happens. Oh yeah, and then he just is hearing this dude Khemu-Usha, who's his vizier, and giving him this whole fucking spiel about how he's the coolest guy ever, blah 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 blah. And he knows that these speeches that are being given to him were given to his ancestors, who had performed much more heroic feats as Pharaoh, much more classically heroic feats as Pharaoh than he did. And he questions whether or not he deserves it. And in fact, his inner monologue makes it seem like he does not believe like he is a good Pharaoh or should be regarded in the ways that he is. And I love that. And then he brings up Menenhetit and how he is also in attendance at this gathering, but up on the balcony with him. He's like, I got Menenhetit here. And Menenhetit's like, and all you bitches, I was in that fucking war. You don't even know. The Battle of Kadesh. I was there. I'm the only one there. I'm the only one alive now who was in that. And then the counselors below talk to each other for a while, and they're like, it seems clear that they know that was a long, long time ago, like 150 years, which far surpasses the, I guess, 10-year lifespan of pharaohs. I wonder if that's how long pharaohs lasted. 10 years? 10-year pharaoh. That's not how you spell pharaoh. You know Pharaoh Sanders? Saunders, maybe? That dude's the shit. Oh, and then Menenhedet too. The 6-year-old child, who is actually a 21-year-old dead man, comes back into consciousness in the chill ass room of the pharaoh that's painted all dope as heck, and his mom is caressing him, Athfertiti. And he mentions he did not know that his grandfather was 180 years old, because he was 30. I guess he knows this at the Battle of Katep. I don't know where he came up with that number 180, but I don't pay attention super well. And the mom, seemingly aghast at this inner knowledge her 6-year-old child has, collects herself and then says, I have to tell you something. This is the 4th incarnation of your great-grandfather, Menenhedet I. Leaving off at a fucking pretty big cliffhanger. Luckily, not much incest in there, thank God. I really hope we can keep up with this. Just getting so fucking gross. Awesome. This book is just, I did not expect to read for an hour. It's so good.